Hi everyone and welcome back to the next lesson of our Java course. So in previous lesson we talked about if statement, right? We discussed about how I can execute a certain block or a certain code if a certain condition is true, right? It was a simple one form of our conditional logic. Now the question is, or let's try to understand it a little. So for example, we had this decision, right? Let's say this is my if condition, and then say if this is true, let's say I will say true, then execute this, or this was my special case, right? Only if condition, and then I have a normal condition here. Okay, now if condition is false, let's say this is false, the logic was coming here, right? So there was two workflows in short. If this is true, it comes here, then it goes here, and if this condition is false, everything directly comes here. So this section, right, this specific section was skipped, right? But in day-to-day life or in normal cases, right, we probably will get into a situation where I want to run my code or I want to execute my logic, but I want to have two different set of conditions, which says if things works, or if this block is true, then execute this one or execute this one, right? So it's like, okay, what if we want to do something different when the condition is false, right? There was no such criteria in this one, and that's where our if else condition will get into a picture. So in Java there is a way where you can say if the condition is true, run this code, else go to this one. So it's typically a if else scenario. All right, okay, so now, and I will have a condition here, and this will be my if logic. Okay, and then I will have a else condition, and this will have my else logic, right? Okay, now remember one thing. So typically if the condition is true, this code will be executed, right? Now let's say if this condition is false, right? Let's say this condition is false. Now what's going to happen is your JVM will go here, it will say, hey, this condition is false. So it's going to skip this section, entire this section, and it will go to the else condition. So anything which is written inside this else block will be executed. There is one interesting thing when you are working on a if and else condition is, if you see, if always should have some conditional logic, right? It should be evaluated to a boolean value. But when it comes to the else, there is no such conditional logic. It's just a block, because else is always gonna get in combination for a if this is true, it execute, else this is the default true. Let's go back again to our editor, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna look a closer look into some of the example and some of the variations which probably we're gonna use in our day-to-day programming language. Okay, so let's take this example where you are getting a number, an integer value as an input, and based upon this value, whether this value is even or a odd, you want to run a certain code, right? For example, if it's an even number, you want to process this number in a certain way, you have a different logic which you want to execute. But if it is an odd number, right, you want to execute it differently. Now how you can do that? So in order to do that, as we discussed earlier, right, in Java there is a way where you can say if this is an even number, else do something like that. Okay, so let's say we have a integer number and I'm going to put value as 5, and then I will say if number, and I'm gonna, for getting the even and odd, right, I'm gonna use the modulo operator. I will say this is a even number. All right, I'm doing a print statement, but you can add any such logic in your code, right? And this is an odd number. Now, and we know that in modulo operator, if your remainder is coming as 0, this means it's a even number. Now, if I run this one, you will say this is an odd number. So instead of this simple system.out printer, right, I can have my custom logic to process this, right? For example, I probably want to get data from somewhere else, do something else. If it's an odd number, similarly, if it's an even number, I can do something like that. All right. So now in this case, you are running two different set of conditions, right? So similarly, what we actually learn into the if condition, where you can have a nested conditions within the if, you can also do the same set of a logic using a if and else statement. For example, in the else, right, if I will say, if this is a, let's say, take example, if number is greater than 5, okay, I want to do something differently here, right? Greater than 5. Else, I want to do something differently. Now, what you are doing is you are basically doing a nested operation within the else, right? You are basically saying, I want to run some specific code. So you are again using if and else. So you can use any sort of a combination, but the idea is here is that now you have a more control into your conditional logic, where you know that, okay, if certain conditions are meeting, do this, if not, then do that. Similarly, you can also use these conditions here. For example, you can also say, if this condition is meeting, if, let's say, I will say number is equal to 2, do something, or do something special, and then for others only do this thing, right? So what is going to happen is, if number is 2, it's going to process this statement and this statement. So you can basically manage these conditions the way you want, but the thing is, now it's giving you more of the flexibilities, right? Now there is another scenario, right? This was a very simple scenario where I have two different conditions. If the number is even, then go here. If the number is odd, go here. So let's say, how will you handle a situation where you have more than two conditions, right? Where let's say you are saying, okay, if this or this or this or this, otherwise this, right? And these are very normal day-to-day conditions, right? So how are you gonna handle those scenarios? So in Java, right, there is a way where you can handle these sort of conditions, right? So in Java, it gives you another combination which says else if. So what you can do is, for example, you are saying, if this condition is meeting, then do this or this or this or this, right? So let's take one example where you are getting a number, and if number is less than 0, you want to process it differently. But if number is 0, you want to process it differently. And if the number is greater than 0, right, which is a positive number, you want to do it differently. So in this case, there are 3 different conditions, and you want to have a different logic for all the 3 different conditions. So in that one, Java gives you something, right, else if. So within else, you can also write if condition. So let's see this one. Okay, we have this number 5. I will say, if number is greater than 0, okay, I will say it's a positive number. Okay, sorry, positive number. Okay, then I want to, if this number is, let's say, is a negative number, so for that one I can say else if, and then you have to write the condition. Since this is a combination of else and if, you have to provide some condition which again gonna be evaluated to a boolean value. So I'm gonna say, if number is less than 0, it's a negative number. And finally I will say else, not try again, I will say number is 0. Reason is because if number is greater than 0, we are handling it here, less than 0, we are handling it here. So the only other combination is the 0, right? So let's run this program. If you run this one, it says positive number because this condition is true. Another thing which you have to check, right? Let's say if I change this condition to if number is equal to 5. Okay, now in this case, if you run this program, right, it says positive number. So even if the condition is, this condition is also true on paper, right, but it's not gonna execute. The way it works is, as soon as first condition is meeting, it gonna get into that, and then it will skip all the other conditions logic on this one. Okay, so this is critical. You should be clear on this one, how these things works. Okay, all right. Now there is another thing which, and then you can have as many else if as you want. For example, I can have another else if which says if number is equal to, let's say, 10, positive number, or let's say number 10. Even if you change this number as 10, there will be no change into your output. Okay, it still say positive number. So first condition, because number is 0, it's gonna basically skip all these else if conditions. It's not gonna say okay because this is also matching. No. So else is something, if the first condition is meeting, else condition is not gonna execute. If you want to run those sort of a logic, instead of else if, you can change it to if. Okay, now if you run this program, it's gonna print those. So if there is a if condition works in a way where all if blocks which are matching, they will be executed. But when it comes to if else, or if and then the combination of a else if and else, only the condition, first condition which is true, will be executed. Rest of your blocks will not be evaluated, they will be skipped. Okay, one more thing which you should be clear on those one, right? When we are talking about else can only exist with the if block. For example, you can have an independent if block without any else statement, right? And that we already saw in our previous lesson. But when it comes to the else, you cannot have a else without a if. So if you remove this one, your compiler will not let you compile the program, right? It's basically will give you the compile time error. So if you do this one, right, it says else without if. So you cannot have a, similarly, you cannot have a else if. Okay, it will have the same problem. It's saying you cannot have a else if, right? Oh, sorry, I'm gonna add condition which says true by default, right? But it's again not gonna work. And that's nothing new. It's basically what we do in our day-to-day life. We cannot have a else only. We have a plan A, we have a plan B. We cannot have only plan B, right? Okay, so that's that. Now we learned about the logical operators in our previous lesson. With this one, you can combine these logical operators in the if and else statements. Let's again say I have a age as one criteria, right? And I want to say if you are, let's say, less than 18 years or greater than 60 years, right? Let's say if you are in that age group, you will get a discount. But for others, you won't get any discount, right? So now I can use my logical operators and a if and else to achieve this thing, right? Now what I'm saying is here is I'm using my or logical operator. But if you see, what I'm saying is if you're less than 18 years or less than equal to, for example, and then you are greater than equal to 60 years, you are gonna get that qualify for a discount. But for others, you will not qualify for a discount. If you run this one, it will say you qualify for discount because currently I have set the age as 10. So it's a very powerful thing when you use the logical operators and the conditional logic. It's gonna be a powerful combination. remember one more thing. Logical operators, most of the logical operators you are gonna use while you are using your conditional logic in Java. All right. There are few scenarios where you're gonna use some of the logical operators, and we're gonna talk about it. But most of the time, for example, your logical operators, your expression arithmetic operators and other things, they are used in combination of these conditional logics, if or else statements. Okay. Again, there are few things which you should be careful, and some of the best practices probably you keep in mind. Number one is the braces, right? When you are adding these braces, and we talked about the same what we talked about into the if condition. So braces are very, very, very critical. If you want to run certain set of the instructions under a condition, make sure everything is under curly braces, right? These braces, starting brace and the end brace. If you don't add these braces, only the first line, which is right after this if statement, will be treated as or will be executed as part of that block. If there are other statements, they will be excluded. And the second thing is, we have talked about it. This is an assignment operator, and this is your double equal operator. So when you evaluate this one, it returns you a Boolean value, while assignment operator assign the value to your variable. Again, if you found this helpful, if you find these videos helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel. Until then, see you next time. Keep coding.